I think caricature as an art form has suffered some reputational harm because of all the artists who just draw big ears on children at theme parks. Actually, I know some really great theme park caricaturists, but a good caricaturist does something quite remarkable. And I'll just bring up this image by world-renowned caricaturist Sebastian Kruger. This caricature not only captures the likenesses of Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman from The Shawshank Redemption, but it designs the planes of the head in a cartoony, surreal kind of way, in a way that is exaggerated. And exaggeration is at the heart of caricature. The thing I like about exaggeration as a learning tool, and here I'll draw a little cheesy little graph. Let's say reality is represented by this little line, this little graph. This charts the patterns of reality. I'll write the letter R to represent reality. Now, caricature exists in the same pattern, but it's heightened. So a caricature path might look like this. The lumps get bigger, they get more exaggerated. Maybe this long one gets longer. Like a caricature does what reality does, but in a way that's more obvious or more revealed. It's a little less subtle. Not to say caricatures can't be subtle, but it brings the reality, the truth of the situation into undeniable relief. So I'll just put the letter C here to represent caricature. And what I just love about this caricature, and let's specifically look at the Andy Dufresne character here, I just love the way that the planes of the head are so pronounced. Like, we know that the orbital of the skull is here. And remember this ridge where that you can see the edge of the orbital bone? Look how flat Kruger has made that. And then in comparison, the zygomatic, which is more straight, and you know what, let me bring up the skull here. So this point right in here, this line, is this, right? We see that ridge. And then the zygomatic, which is this bone here, has that straight. And it's there in the skull, but oftentimes the flesh, when laid over, can disturb that nice 90-degree rhythm. But Kruger understands planes and anatomy, and he has given us this very raw look. It's almost like the skull is completely superficial there. Now, from a design potential, this gives Kruger the ability to contrast this flatness here with the rounded fleshiness of the laugh line here. I mentioned in an earlier section that the flesh kind of like pools up here. There's a lot of space in the cavity of our mouths there, so we have a lot of pooling of flesh, or gathering of flesh, you might say. So we have a strong subcutaneous statement next to a strong fleshy statement, and he's exaggerating that basic idea of flat versus round. And then here it's somewhere in the middle. We have this nice flat plane of the maxilla. Remember that 1, 2, 3 thing, right? We have that nice thing. And just look at the contrast in the direction of these planes. If I were to cross contour with my red marker here, it goes like up, and down in this very, like I just drew the letter M there. Like it just is so pronounced. Also, remember that little plane that I talked about that sets off the upper lip? Well, look, it's there. It's like carved out, chiseled out. This is just, to me, a remarkable piece of work. Also, you can look at the lip. Look at the upper lip. Remember this middle plane that kind of jutted out a little bit further, and then the rest of the lip came out from behind it? That is there. We have like the rhythms that we talked about. Like, look at the sad face rhythm of the chin. It's just this nice exaggerated rhythm. It's brought into, like I said earlier, stark relief. It's impossible not to notice it. Look at the rhythm here. That rhythm that connects the nasolabial furrow from the wings of the nose down to the rhythm of the chin through these planes. Remember the 1, 2, 3 planes. It's just this beautiful connection made more obvious. So to be an artist on the level of a Sebastian Kruger, you need to have fully internalized all the lessons that I'm talking about in this whole class, and then on top of that, layer a design aesthetic, because it's not obvious, what you should be doing with the planes of the head until you have seen them enough and internalized them enough to then be able to convert them into a design language. When I say design language, I mean what I talked about earlier, like flat versus curved, straight versus curved, circles versus squares, whatever it is. For instance, we can see that this rhythm of the nose, the nasolabial furrow coming down past the corners of the mouth and meeting the chin, he's kind of done it in 3 straight lines. He's kind of gone like this, like that, and like this, like that, and like that. It's chiseled. It kind of matches the chiseled aspect of the 3 planes of the maxilla where the mouth is. And I just love these design harmonies that a good caricature artist puts in the work. if you look at the eye right here, we have this strong sense of overlap. This is the upper lid overlapping. Here is the tear duct. Here's the eyeball, and we have this beautiful shape. The upper lid overlaps the lower, and then we have this really exaggerated lower lid that comes right up. It almost tucks up under the tear duct, which is an interesting choice. Then that iris is positioned somewhere over there. Then the eyebrow kind of makes this triangular shape here and sort of is shaped like this. Kind of a lot of angles here. Angles that, again, have a design harmony to them. These triangles and circular rhythms, just putting one against the other in a way that is very deliberate. And I can't, there's no rules as to what looks good and what doesn't. But generally speaking, what looks good is an understanding of reality. And all caricature is an exaggeration in the direction of reality, which is a thing that is very pleasing aesthetically to people, because everyone understands what reality looks like. Even a non-artist who doesn't draw, they may not know how to draw a face, but they can understand what a face looks like because we see faces every day. When you have a caricature artist who clearly exhibits an understanding of that, everyone notices. Everyone can look at this face, and even though it's so exaggerated, like a human being doesn't actually look like this, literally, a human being feels like this. And that's what I love about the art form. It captures a feeling, which is all of what art's all about, right? Art is supposed to capture a feeling. Let's take a look at the lips. We have this really exaggerated Cupid's bow coming down to meet the corner of the mouth, which can curve up a little bit. The other side kind of juts down at this angle, curves up at the end. And then we have this really exaggerated plane for the middle of the upper lip, behind which comes the rest of the lip. And then there is this nice sort of shelving action for the lower lip. You can really tell that the upper lip is wrapping around the lower lip. You cannot draw this if you don't know what you're drawing. You just won't arrive at these conclusions. Your drawing will look vague and undesigned. It won't remind people of truth. But if you know what the forms do, and especially then if we just threw on a quick little value to emphasize the fact that the upper lip in this case is pointed downward and the lower lip is pointed upward, we get this beautiful three-dimensional mouth that, again, is just a little heightened from reality. We can even cross-contour our stuff and get a dramatically deeper thing for our Cupid's bow, and we can find the rhythm of this outer sort of circular rhythm that I keep talking about, which is one of my favorite rhythms of the head, by the way. We can trace it down. We can find the sad face rhythm of the chin. Remember, these planes are a bit rounder, whereas this one is more flat. And we can just throw in a little value there. Actually, Kruger has inverted this. In his drawing, he has changed these planes to go in like this. And there's no rules here, I've even shown you in real life these planes change. So we're doing this kind of thing. Maybe this will get sort of a half value to show that it's still going down. I just love this stuff. Let's continue searching here. Here's Kruger's take on Marlon Brando from The Godfather, and those fold lines are supposed to be in the picture, by the way. What I like about this is he's kind of taken the overall funnel shape of the head. Remember, the head kind of funnels this way, but he's inverted it. He's made the head funnel this way. So he's given himself this inverted funnel shape. This kind of represents the entire head. And then from here, he's kind of fitting the skull onto it. So let's just quickly mock this up. We can find the orbitals. I'm not going to try and get an exact copy of this drawing, but let's kind of find the orbitals, which are in here. And let's just throw a value on them. He's coming down the brow, and he's cutting that zygomatic line flat again, just like he did on the Andy Dufresne one a moment ago. He's cutting that straight line down, that straight line across. Then he's coming down for the front plane of the zygomatic. And then he's letting that depression happen in the mouth. But because he's pointing his skull out this way, he knows he has to build back up to the superficial, the subcutaneous part of the mandible, which is subcutaneous all the way around the head. So he knows he's got to come out this way and build up to the mandible. So he's slowly tapering his jawline out, and then there's a stronger sort of taper here as that flesh becomes subcutaneous with the mandible bone. So you can see how we're getting down to, the layers beneath this caricature. We're kind of defining or figuring out, reverse engineering what the skull of this particular alternate reality human being would look like. We know the eye would fit in here. So if we, got the eyeball in there and just started drawing the overlapping lower lid, there's a bit of a drooping action to it here. Comes back out. That ball wraps around. And the lower lid, he's got that sagging lower lid action, which makes the person look older or tired. That lower lid rhythm kind of repeats a little bit. Throwing in the iris immediately gives the thing some character. And the eyebrows formed just on the top of the orbital bone here. There's this beautiful rhythm of the brow line there. You notice he's even got the thickness of the orbital. So the orbital bone has a certain thickness to it that comes up for the protuberance of the brow here that we talked about as it wraps around. And then the rest of the brow comes from behind it. It's a nice sense of overlap there. And the skull goes about that high. The nose is really pushed wider than it is in reality. And we have that nice sort of, remember that number 6 shape for the nostril to indicate it's the fact that the nostril lies on 2 different planes. We have that exaggerated sort of number 6. And the ball of the nose is really pushed round. And because the skull pushes out this way, what we have is the rhythm that I love so much for the nasolabial furrow has to come out accordingly. It's being stretched horizontally. So it's got to come out. And then Kruger kind of loses it a little bit here, like he doesn't show it to us here, but it's still there. It's linked. We know that we can follow this rhythm to find the sad face rhythm of the chin. Then from here, the interior of the mouth is making all kinds of fun little shapes, moving in and out, but wrapping around that cylinder. Kind of undulations of this line that emphasize that the mouth is wrapping around a tooth cylinder. And then we can complete the rest of the upper lip. Just throw it into a bit of value there. And the lower lip is this giant thing in this case. And again, I know this is not a perfect replica of this drawing. That's not what I'm going for. I'm just trying to understand the planes that he's using. That is to say, how he has redesigned the planes for aesthetic reasons. And of course, the jaw continues out on this side. And we have the same sort of design on both sides. I'm just going to go ahead and block in some ancillary areas, shapes for the ear, some shapes for the hair, the other eyebrow, etc. And again, when I'm quickly sketching like this, I like to just show the underplanes, like if the light is coming from above, which I generally have the light coming from above, because that's kind of the most common way we see light in the real world. Light usually comes from above. The sun or a light in our houses or something, usually located above us. So I'll just throw planes that point under into tone. So I'm just massing all of those planes of the nose into tone. There's a bit of a cast shadow here. You can just mask that in with the form shadow of the nose. We've already got the upper lip in shadow. We can get that plane under the lower lip, which is kind of doing this. We can get some of the nasolabial furrow right where it's touching the nostrils. That's a very deep crevice sometimes, especially on an older model. It can actually go into some pretty dark shadow there. Then it usually tapers off and becomes halftone, actually, as it drifts down toward the mouth. So you can watch out for that careful interpolation of the tone. So shadow up here near the wings of the nose, and then becoming lighter, or in other words, halftone over here. Same with the corners of the mouth. The corners of the mouth may begin in a deep shadow, but they really have this dimple-like tapering effect. It's a very graceful transition as the dimple of the corner of the mouth. The dimple rolls gracefully and softly from deep shadow into light. Subtle bits of the underplane here that we're seeing, because we're kind of looking at this guy a little bit from below. So we're seeing a little bit of that turn to the underside of the head. And I'm just going to throw the ear in a general shadow here. You can get a few planes indicated, that bent Y shape indicated from this angle. And I'm just going to mask that in. If we wanted to take this sketch one step further, you can think about little highlights. Now, I haven't mentioned this before, but a highlight can be located wherever two planes meet, or two or more planes. So if you think of the nose, what we have with the nose is the front plane of the nose right here meeting the septum plane, but also there's this other plane here, kind of the side of the septum. Three planes meet right there. You are going to get a highlight, and everyone I think knows the highlight on the nose that exists right around where the ball is. You're also going to get a highlight where the ridge meets, or the front plane of the ridge meets the side plane of the nose. You can see the highlight on the Asaro head where these two planes meet. Where two planes meet, you're going to get a kind of angle of reflection, and if the light matches that angle of reflection, or in other words, if the light is located at the tail end of that angle of reflection, in this case, the reflection bouncing up that way, and of course my light is situated up here, you're going to get that highlight. So that's another reason to potentially add a lighter value to our drawings. So what I'll do is I'll just pretend like there's a light coming from here, kind of shining down this way. So wherever two or more planes meet in this trajectory, there will be a highlight. So there's going to be a highlight of the nose there. There's going to be a highlight of the zygomatic here where the front plane meets the side plane. Remember, I've shown you this plane here meeting that plane there. On the Asaro head, this plane here meeting that plane there. You're gonna have a highlight along that ridge. In fact, I knew a painter who called this a crest light instead of a highlight, because oftentimes these highlights run along like the crest of a shape, I guess. You'll usually have highlights on the lower lip, specifically where the top plane of the lower lip meets the front plane of the lower lip. You'll get that highlight running or cresting through that area. You're also going to get a highlight. Remember that little plane that sets off the upper lip? Well, where the red part of the lip meets that plane, so right, remember there's a plane like that, and then it meets the lip. Well, two planes meeting, you're going to get this crest light or this highlight. Same thing over here. The chin, where the top plane of the chin meets the front plane of the chin, you're going to get a highlight or a crest light right around here, and it can track with the plane. And they can be various sizes depending on the roundness of the form. Like the chin is a kind of a more round form, so it can be a little larger. You'd probably also get a highlight on the other zygomatic bone, as it also would reflect kind of generally up and to the left a little bit. Sometimes you'll even get a hint of a highlight where the nasolabial furrow turns down and meets the front-facing plane of the maxilla. You'll get a bit of a light there, emphasizing that change of direction in plane. And these are common locations for highlights on the head. Oftentimes where the brow changes direction, right in here, you can have a little highlight or crest light kind of running up the form. Again, highlights and crest lights are interchangeable to me. They kind of mean the same thing. Now, everyone knows about the highlights in the eye. The highlights in the eye can happen depending on the environment. Like the eye is such a wet surface that it reflects the environment around it. So you'll oftentimes get all kinds of little speckly highlights in the eye, depending on the environment that your model is in. The eyeball is a highly reflective surface. Another very common highlight you'll get is right underneath the dimple of the corner of the mouth. You can see it in the Kruger painting. It's just this subtle little highlight. And again, it's where two planes are meeting. The dimple going in, meeting the lower lip coming out. It's a very subtle little plane change there. And you can really articulate it with this tiny little highlight. Maybe on the other side would get a little bit of that as well. It goes without saying, I think, that when the light moves, your highlights will move, because a highlight or a crest light is a reflection of the light source. So, it will be beneficial to you to study models that are lit by all kinds of different directions of light, because those highlights will shift with the model. Now, you don't have to include highlights. This is my own little painting philosophy. Highlights to me are fun, but they're not the most useful things. What's way more useful than a highlight is big delineations of average light, halftone, and average shadow. Those to me are much more important than the positions of highlights. But if you have your average light and average shadow ready and in place, go ahead and slap on some highlights as kind of your final touch. It can really pop the head into a strong illusion of three-dimensional space. Just wanted to emphasize the overlapping action here of the upper eyelid coming over the lower eyelid. It's a nice little thick bit of shadow that Kruger has included to really show us that overlapping action. The glabella can often get a bit of halftone. It darkens down a little bit. Same with the side plane of the nose. Often you'll find when the light's coming from above, that is, just a bit of halftone on the side plane of the nose, separating the front from the side. Slap in a bit of the suit there. Anyway, let's call that a finished demonstration. And let's move on to the next section where I'll paint a caricature with watercolor from start to finish.